Well, the last time we met, we spent the entire evening on the topic of feeling. We spoke some about the moon and some about Cancer with respect to the origin of the desire body and especially the focus in the region of feeling. Probably a lot more could have been said astrologically about it all, but I'm trying to avoid having these talks become another astrology set of talks. We'll have a little bit more to say about feeling in this talk, and then later on we'll come back to it again. Before we move forward, I think I have to make a clarification. In the last talk, it was said there was an outward flow of feeling like a reaching out to feel. And I don't think that's quite exactly correct. We said that everybody in every world has an inward flow, such as the senses are in the physical and etheric bodies. And we also said that in every body, in every world, there is also a capacity to be outward and to give and to control the greater or macrocosmic world. In the human, that is accomplished through the muscles. Now, in the desire body, in the individual human desire body, there is a welling out of desire. And that is before, or that is a continuous activity before that desire material wells out, before it can be turned into specific desires. The outwelling capacity to do that is still there. It is there, it is precedent to the actual activity of desiring itself. But there is also, at all of the other 7 vortices of the desire body, there is an inflowing. And that inflowing goes to the region of feeling, so that there is both an outreach and an inflow. Now, I don't know if the region of feeling is centered in each of those vortices that take things to an inner direction. And I won't be able to say with absolute certainty until I can see it for myself and clarify that. So in lieu of being clairvoyant, what we're doing is we're working with intuition and logic and things like that, and we're using metaphors to get at the functioning of the desire world in such a way that we can see it in ourselves and that we can observe it in the behavior of humans around us. We have said that the taking in or the acceptance of stimuli, whether those stimuli are in the physical world or in the world of thought or even in the desire world itself, that is called feeling. It's an ingoing and it is a receptive activity. And an ingoing activity can't really reach out. One may feel a sympathy toward a stimulus or a group of stimuli, and that might activate a desire for more feeling, and then that desire reaches out, and when it reaches out, the feeling follows with it. But the reaching out has to be a matter of desire. Okay, and again, we're speaking somewhat metaphorically when we speak that way. I hope that clarifies things a little bit, because otherwise you get a wrong notion about the way things function in the desire world. Now, obviously, when we talked as much about feeling as we did last time, we brought up all kinds of things that there are all kinds of questions about. And so to begin this talk, I'm going to try to clarify some things that were in what was said last time, leading toward what we're going to talk about this time. Last time we said that feeling was limited by the stimulus. And by that, it is meant that you can only feel what is there. You can't feel more than what is there because there isn't more to be felt. And we also said that we could increase the capacity to feel. That is, we can develop the capacity to feel more different kinds of things, and we can develop the capacity to feel more accurately the things that we do feel. So let's take perception again as an analog to clarify that. We know, for example, that we can only see so much of the spectrum, and the part that we can see is called the visible spectrum. But we also know that we can extend our sensitivity so that we can see things that are invisible, more of the spectrum than normal people know of. And we know that we can expand our field of vision even within our own current visual spectrum. Some people can differentiate between 6 or 7 different colors, between 2 shades of green or 2 hues of green that other people cannot differentiate. So we can be more accurate and we can fine-tune it. We know that dogs hear sounds that humans don't hear, hypersounds, a much higher vibrational level. And elephants hear sounds in a much lower vibrational level than humans, only they don't do it with ears, they do it with their feet. So this means that all of our bodies, desire bodies included, can be developed to feel things that we do not feel now and to feel more accurately the things that we do feel. Now let's begin to explore the relationship between feeling and desire. We're not going to say a whole lot about emotion, feeling, but a lot of the things that we say about feeling and desire apply to the relationship with feeling and emotion. Eventually we'll have a talk, I think, that'll be exclusively about emotion and what can be done with that. Last time we gave an example of someone injuring themselves. The injury, like my cut finger, occurs in the physical body. It is felt through nerves, which are sensitive to pressure and other things. And it gets registered through the nervous system into the etheric nervous system, and by some kind of resonance from the vital body, the etheric vital body, it gets registered in the desire body. And the desire body in the region of feeling is where it is felt. But the desire body is not what does the feeling. It is the spirit that does the feeling. In the case of an animal, if an animal is injured, it is the group or the collective, the species spirit, that feels the pain. In the case of feeling an emotion or a desire from another being that is functioning in the desire world, the process is much more direct. You don't have to go through the nervous system and all of that. It's just desire world to desire world. It's a much simpler transaction but it is still the spirit that does the feeling, the spirit being the knower. Now there's more to it than that, but we'll slowly get our way to that. It is also the spirit that is seeking experience, all of it, because the spirit is the focus of the universal spirit, and the universal spirit forms an evolutionary creation for new experience and to share what it already has. So it is the spirit that gives creatively. So all of the bodies or worlds, be them microcosmic or macrocosmic, are vehicles of the universal spirit or some focus of the universal spirit. So it is spirit then that reaches out for experience, and when it reaches out to feel, it does so through desire. We've got that much clear now. Feeling is not passive. It is actively receptive. To get the most out of feeling, whether it's working through the senses or just working in the desire body, one actively reaches out, wants that, or sensitizes itself, or how would you say, activates the sensitivity. The feeling capacity, as we said, can be expanded in range, and it can be expanded in fine-tuning, though it is the desire for new experience or better understanding of reality that is behind doing all of that. So when there is a stimulus that is felt in the desire body, it comes and it is felt in the central region of interest. The region of feeling, and the central most feeling in the region of feeling is the feeling of interest. So it is the spirit that becomes interested. It receives a stimulus and it becomes interested. In the case of a specific case, like a cat and a mouse meeting each other in an event, the interest is the same. It's the same event that both are interested in, only the response is different for the mouse than the response is for the cat. The spirit itself can be and eventually is interested in everything. So we're talking about the function of the whole of the Creator, so to speak, when we're talking about our, like when in our solar cosmos, the desire world of it has as its central being that sensitivity to feel everything. Because there's new things for the spirit. If there weren't new things for the spirit, there wouldn't be anything new for us. The relationship between feeling and desire is of ultimate importance, whether it is in the microcosm or in the macrocosm. So we have to look more carefully at the relationship between feeling and desire when the interest is awakened. Before we do that in detail, let's look at some general things about the desire world and the desire body so that we know a little bit more clearly what we're dealing with. It's obvious that we as human beings are ignorant about very much of the desire world. And there are several reasons for this. First, the desire body is very young in its development. If you're a gardener and you see a sprout coming out of the ground, sometimes you're not sure what it is because because it's so young in its development that it is undifferentiated. A lot of sprouts look a lot like each other. Another reason is that young things are not defined. They're capable of definition. They're capable of being altered as our children are through education. Another reason is that we're not highly conscious in the desire world. Much of the activity, many of the moods that we go through, we're not conscious of at all. Most people are conscious of only extreme emotions and feelings and desire. And this is why pain is so important to our lives, because pain of various different types is what wakes us up to realities, because we don't seem to wake ourselves up enough by curiosity or by reaching out to know things. This unconsciousness of the desire body is not just only a matter of not waking up, it is something that is promoted by the inner adversary. Something in us would rather keep us ignorant and unconscious so that it can direct our lives for its own good and experience. Our attention is often distracted from what's happening within us, so that with regard to desire and the options that we have when we experience desire, especially some desirable object or some object of desire, we're pretty much unaware, we're distracted. This is promoted. It may originate from the pseudo-self, the inner adversary, or it may be promoted by the beings that the inner adversary is influenced by. But there's a societal prejudice against the desire world, and that keeps it in ignorance. I'm sure every one of us has heard, oh, that's all just emotion. Or somebody will say, you're feeling too much, as if to say that the things of feeling and the things of emotion are superfluous and that they aren't necessary to our being. These are the things that we have to overcome if we want to develop spiritually. If we want to be free people, we have to overcome the social prejudices and things like that. Especially if we maintain prejudices, it taints clairvoyant vision if we have clairvoyant vision. I have myself, I have been ignorant and I've been subject to these kinds of prejudices, which is why I realize that I haven't developed myself in terms of feeling and desire, and that I am deficient in that and need to work on that. All right. Let's begin with one of the most general things of all, and let's do it in question form again. Speculating, trying to clarify things about the desire body in general. Is there a differential quotient between desire bodies of different individuals? And if there is it significant? And if so, why is there such a differential? Even without clairvoyance, it's obvious that the answer to the first question is a resounding yes. Some people obviously have much stronger desire bodies than others. Some people feel more than others, and they feel more intensely, and they emote more intensely, And the same thing can be said about desires. So desire body to desire body, there is a difference. Is it significant? That's a more difficult question. If an individual is weak with regard to feeling and desire, it's harder to progress. If we don't feel what's going on and we're unaware of the options and the potentials that we have from feeling and desire, progress is obviously diminished. Some people prefer. They would just as soon not feel too much. And I'm sure we've all heard those, we've all encountered those types of people. They just as soon turn the switch off if they could. If we don't have desire to instigate new experiences, we aren't going to grow, because we grow through experience. That's the reason for the whole business, is creative experience. So without being motivated to do new things, there can be no soul growth. There can be no evolution. So depending on the quality and the control of emoting and desiring, the other extreme can also inhibit progress. We all know people who get so choked with emotion that it's difficult for them to feel things clearly. If one is carried away by an extreme desire that is out of the control of the spirit, one is likely to go astray from evolutionary intent. So people do have different desire quotients. I have a friend who is quite handsome and has had a few girlfriends in life, and he tells me that the first thing that he looks for when he meets a woman that he would be interested in is, he said, I want a woman with a low desire quotient. Because otherwise she's always going to want more in life, and you're always going to be spending your life trying to satisfy the more and more that she wants. The funny thing is that he is now with a woman that not only wants more and more, but absolutely needs more and more from him, but he loves her, and he say, we all become prisoners of love, and when that happens, we do things that we would never have done without love. When we come to the why question, why is there differential? I only have one answer, and it's very simple. Choice. We freely choose what we prefer in life. And if we prefer to be non-emotional, I'm sure you've known all these people that become upset when they're around high desire or high emotional people. They choose, I don't want that. Some people prefer a life of feeling and emotion, then rather have that than a quiet thought life. And some people prefer other things. Some people prefer to be in the vital body. They want more action. They don't want just emotion, or they don't want just desire. And some people are sensate. They would rather be in the senses. So we freely choose what we become in evolution. And so many people are thinking about destiny debts that they have due from past lives, and they're thinking about little specific things, how they owe this person this or that's this person that. That's all fine, but in the process they're missing the big picture. They're not looking at what they're becoming. They're not looking at whether they're cultivating emotion, or they're not looking at whether they're learning how to think or something like that. All right, let's look at a little less general thing and follow it along in a similar way. Is there a differential between the major functions within any given desire body? And if so, is it significant? And if it's significant, why? Now, it's conceivable that one can have a perfect balance between feeling and emotion and desire, but it's probably rare if it ever happens. It's a theoretical balance. I'm sure we've all met people who have all kinds of feelings, but they don't take desire and they aren't motivated to do anything about those feelings. In a way, they're almost a prisoner of their feelings. And we all know people who are prisoners of emotion, and we all know people who are prisoners of desire. So there are a lot of different possibilities for an individual in the composition of the desire body, without even talking about all the different flavors that come from all the different planetary desires that are available to us. So there are all sorts of ways that we can be constituted. We can do that by emphasizing or de-emphasizing things from our experience. We can emphasize feeling, or we can de-emphasize it. We can emphasize emotion, or we can emphasize desire. It has happened to me for many years. Before I began teaching astrology and talking on mystical subjects, I was a much more observant person. But if you're giving out all the time and you're not drawing in feelings, you don't keep a pace. And so what happened to me is I became a less observant person until it dawned on me that, hey, I'm not making any new observations about things in life and I need to balance this. At the same time that we're balancing the three major functions, we are working with different flavors of feelings. Saturnian feelings or Jupiterians or whatever. You can get very specific about this. There are some people that choose to feel only good things, or better yet, people who choose to experience pleasant things. That's one of the reasons, one of the psychospiritual reasons for diabetes. People only want the pleasant things in life, and they pamper themselves in that regard, and very often that's the etiology behind diabetes. The question of whether it's significant or not has to be determined in terms of evolutionary intent. If our evolutionary intent is experience, then we can't recognize the opportunities for experience without the ability to feel. There's no soul growth without external action, so we have to know what's going on out there. We can't just be inwardly in ourselves in something like a daydream. If there's any combination of balance and imbalance between feeling, emoting, and desiring, it's probably being highly emotional, but being low in feeling and low in desire. It's like spinning your wheels, churning the desire body, but doing nothing and really not having a full experience of anything but your own emotions. I believe that at other times in our evolution, emotion will play a bigger part of our creative work. But right now, to be carried off in emotion and not being motivated by desire to do things or not do things, it is not really pro-evolutionary. Again, the why question has exactly the same answer. It's a matter of free choice. What we do and what we don't do is what we become. And what we stress in our desire nature and what we downplay in our desire nature is also a matter of free choice. everything we do is going to change what kind of beings we are. Now, we want to explore something a little less general and something a little more specific, because it leads us to our topic for tonight, which we haven't gotten to yet. Is there, or should there be, a commensurate relationship between the incoming and the outgoing activities of the desire body, especially between feeling and desire? What I'm trying to get at is there a par relationship, or should there be a par relationship between a stimulus and a response? And what I have to say is only tentative and not at all final. In fact, everything I say is only tentative, because I start doing these things and more and more and more understanding comes. My observation, as I see in myself and people around me, is that there is not a par relationship between stimulus and response, even though there probably should be. Earlier this evening and in the last talk, we said that feeling is limited by the stimulus. We can only feel what is in the stimulus and nothing more. There's only so much to the reality. Now, it's possible by an act of will to override feeling and be numb or be ignorant or to take no interest at all in stimuli. But it's not possible to feel more than is there. However, it is possible to over-respond or to overreact to the stimulus that we feel very clearly. We've all seen it, where one little event, sometimes one word, will provoke an emotional response that is extremely strong, or a desire response. One whiff of chocolate could probably sometimes set me off for weeks at a time. We have to be careful in addressing this, because the response may not be tied to the immediate stimulus. Lou and other psychiatrists and psychologists find that in many things we have built up a big store of feelings or desires, and then something comes along and triggers them, and it isn't a direct response to the stimulus. It's just, it touched upon a complex that's highly charged with desire world entity and energy, and then bam, everything comes up. Sometimes it's even like an innocuous stimulus. Even in regular cases where there's a stimulus and a response and there's an imbalance, it seems to be different. I don't know how to say it. So the same thing can be said about stimulus and emotion, or stimulus and desire. That one can feel something, but the response to the feeling is way out of bounds. It doesn't so often happen that the response to the feeling is less. It usually is more the other direction. At least that's the way it happens. I even had a friend at one time that was addicted to cocaine and crack cocaine, the derivative of it. And he was working as a busboy, and he had a Pavlovian response to a stimulus. He'd walk through the tables picking up dishes, and he'd see a spoon there that had sugar on, and it was still moist. And he said, I'd start salivating right on the job. Quite something. Now, again, I'm being subjective in this case, but I don't think I'm being unduly subjective in the conclusion that I come to about this. But when most people find that there is not a power relationship between stimulus and response, we feel something is wrong. Something feels queasy, inside of you. It seems unnatural. And it is that feeling which I think is a natural feeling, and I don't think that it is a skewed feeling at all. And that's what leads me to believe that there really is an appropriateness, a cosmic appropriateness, and a balance in life so that our response to something is neither too strong or too little. I don't know how that parity should be. I think there has to be leeway in it, because interpreting stimuli and interpreting a general situation is the stuff that's art is made of. The ability to interpret a set of notes is what differentiates one musician from another musician. But it's within the bounds of appropriateness, the relationship between emotive response. Somebody sent me a whole bunch of those pictures that they sent around the internet today, a beautiful collection of photographic images, and they were all, I don't know how, stylized, and they were over-colored. And I got that same feeling that this is beyond the bounds of what, I don't know how to put it any other way, of good taste. You know what I mean? There's a limit. I suppose it's different from one person to another, but some things you see like that and it's just not right. So, I believe that what we're talking about here is, again, a matter of free choice. And it is a spontaneous matter. That what we're talking about, in a way, is the mechanics of how things work in the desire body or in the desire world as well. But we don't have to be mechanical about it. We're meant to be people that can respond in a creative way. And I know people who do try to have creative lives. The experiences, everything experienced in their life. I had a girlfriend once that says, you've got a shelf full of dishes of all different colors and you're eating off of the same drab white plate all the time. You need to have more color in your life. And that's, that's somebody that is a very accomplished artist. You could see why. So we're meant to be creative, but I think within bounds. One of our goals in terms of the evolution, and it determines our health and our ability to evolve within what is there, is to be able to see reality clearly and to respond to reality in such a way that it is pro-evolutionary. And if we don't see reality clearly, or if our response to reality is out of proportion to what the reality is, we're going to find ourselves as evolutionary misfits very quickly. And that isn't like a social misfit, where it's something that cannot go on in that way. All right. This brings us to the talk for tonight, and brings us to the next leg of our tour through the desire world in a functional way. First, we looked at the desire world in terms of the theory of color. Then we looked at the desire world in terms of the universal language of character, that is astrology. And now we're looking at it functionally, and this is the second talk on the functional tour, and there'll be at least one more. We are at the juncture where feeling meets desire, or feeling meets emotion. Before we go into this, it's important to reiterate that it is the spirit the self that feels and interprets and responds. However, it's not that simple, because we also have a pseudo-self. And that pseudo-self lives in the desire body and is capable of, in proxy, feeling and interpreting with limitation, and it will respond to its own satisfaction. This is what the spiritual life is like. It's the battle between the spirit and that pseudo-self, in large part for control of the desire body. If we look at the words of St. Paul, he says, "The good that I would, I do not, but that which I would not, that do I." And you can see that he's dealing with that same struggle that we're dealing with. So, when we're talking about the desire body, we could have clairvoyance, but even if we externalized clairvoyance too much, we still wouldn't get things right. It's important to pay attention to what is going on inside of ourselves and to take control. We, the spirit, the divine part of our being, to take control of everything in our inner domain that is not right, instead of just being slaves to our desires or getting emotional and not doing things that could be done. It's all about freedom. How does that statement go? You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And so this is why we're going to be introspecting a little bit, not just for a mere exhibition of introspection, but to find something useful for progress. We're going to have one talk about all practical things with regard to the desire body before we're finished. It's probably going to be almost next May before we get out of the desire world. To work our way into how response to interest comes about, interest being that most basic of all feelings, let's return to our previous analogs or our metaphors for understanding the desire body. Let's return to the language of character, and then eventually to the language of color. The universal language of character that describes character, that is the nature of character, is astrology. Previously we said that the desire body, and especially the part of the desire body that relates to feelings, including interest, is ruled by the moon. However, there are other subdivisions of the desire world and the desire body that have other rulerships. The desire body was built, or commenced its building, in the moon period. And so the moon is the general ruler of the desire body. Whether you're looking at a horoscope or whether you're just trying to understand the nature of desire, by focusing on the moon, it gives you a third point so that you can do that. Let's begin by looking at a response to a stimulus to understand how astrology is the framework or the underlayment of the desire world, both in terms of function and in terms of structure. One of the most important things about desire is that it is objective. One of the most important things about the desire, but the nature of desire, is that it is objective. A specific stimulus can be seen or described as an object of interest, whether it's a physical thing or it's another emotion or anything like that. It is an object of interest. The spirit or the pseudo-self that feels the experience or that feels the stimulus is the subject. So the feeling and desire transaction is a transaction between a subject and an object. Figuratively, you can say that such a transaction produces a connection between subject and object. And the connection between the subject and object is bidirectional. It's a two-way street, as any transaction or any connection between two things must be. We have to remember that in the desire world, nothing is coldly mechanical. Even that feeling of indifference that kills off the relationship with any object immediately has character. I could go into that astrologically now, but that would be, again, being too astrological. When the subject initiates a desire as a result of a stimulus, as a result of a feeling that it's interested in, the desire has an intention. And the nature of the intention determines the desire force in the transaction. Now, clairvoyant researchers find that there are two basic types of intentions. There are many, many intentions, but two basic kinds of intention. Two basic kinds of motivation to action. Using the universal language of astrology, action is a key word for Mars. Mars is the actor, the doer. And it is therefore said that Mars rules desire. Now, if we go right back to our first principles that we started out this series of talks with a long, long time ago, I think it was 2 years ago, we know that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In the physical world, it's just a matter of force and counterforce. But in the desire world, everything has more character than just simple force. So the martial intent and the motive force has an opposite character force, which is a Venusian character force. So therefore, the character of the two types of motivation or of intent are active desire, ruled by Mars, and attractive desire in response, or as a response, or as a, I should say, a polar opposite. Now in astrology, there are three types of signs. There are cardinal signs, the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th. There are fixed signs, the 2nd, the 5th, the 8th, and the 11th. And there are common signs, the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th, and the 12th. And each of them relates to one of the parts of Trinity, of the Trinity of the Godhead. Fixed signs are fields of attitude for permanence. They represent like immovable objects, so that when something in the cosmos has to be made permanent, it is done through the fixed signs. Cardinal signs are for active change. So when some of the change has to come about and to be effective, it is done under cardinal signs. So if the fixed signs are immovable objects, the cardinal signs are irrepressible forces, as in the song, something's got to give. And what gives is the third set of signs, the common signs, which communicate back and forth between the other two extremes. Now, we said earlier and all along that the signs represent fields of attitude. And the planets, astrologically speaking, are foci. They are precipitates, living, specialized precipitates from the fields of attitude that are the signs. They are the things, they are the keys that specify or realize the potentials of the signs. And each of the planets is a condensation or is ruled by, so to speak, by one or two signs. So the planets are keys that open up what the grand hierarchies of the signs hold as a constant field, a background, so to speak. And in astrology, astrologers use a key to open up the planets and the signs. They use key words. It's like everything in our language is itself astrological. All of the words, if you trace almost any word back, you find out that any word taken back goes to the name of a god. We used to do havans at Ila's house a few years ago, and we were reading material from the Vedas, and it was clear that all of the words there were divine names, and they had become language as we know language now. So we're looking at key words of key planets and key to open up those planets and to open up those signs. So if we look, we're trying to understand motive action. So if we're trying to understand motive action, we want to look at the cardinal signs that are ruled by Mars and Venus. And one of the key words for Aries, which is the cardinal Mars sign, is self-assertion. One of the key words for Venus, cardinal Venus in Libra, is self-sacrifice for the other. Now, these two simple words or sets of words describe exactly what clairvoyant researchers find to be the two basic motivations in the desire world. When we desire by self-assertion, or we desire our relationship to the object is self-sacrifice. We are motivated to action to assert ourselves or to sacrifice ourselves, one or the other. Now what we're saying here is very simplified, because we have all kinds of mixed motivations and flavors and things like that, but we're trying to get at the simplest thing of a very simple transaction in the desire world. Now these two forces, these two motivations initiate twin forces. So in a way you might say that the forces that are activated in desire are activated by specific motivations. And you might then say that since the fixed signs follow the cardinal signs, that in a way the fixed signs are consequences of the cardinal signs. We find that in the most basic way, that the most simple kind of self-assertion produces the resistance of Taurus. So fixed signs then represent consequences. So there are two fixed signs that relate to Mars and Venus. The Martial fixed sign is Scorpio, and the Venus fixed sign is Taurus. This is a little too astrological. One of the most basic keywords for Scorpio is repulsion. And one of the most basic keywords for Taurus is attraction. You can look at this in any astrology book going back centuries. Now, these are exactly the words used by clairvoyant investigators to describe the twin forces. The twin forces active in the desire world are attraction and repulsion. So we see that the motive of self-assertion has the effect of activating repulsion, and that the motive of self-sacrifice activates attraction. From this we can see why the higher desire world is said to be ruled by Venus, because there is no self-assertion there, at least for self-intent. And for that reason, there's only attraction. In fact, attraction is found throughout the desire world. It's how things are brought together is through attraction. That is because the whole creation is a sacrifice. And that the consequence of that sacrifice of the spirit results in an attraction that holds everything together in the creation. So you can actually literally say that love holds everything together in the entire creation. Rudolf Steiner goes so far as to say that the manifest expression of love as a result of sacrifice is warmth. So the heat of manifestation, like brilliant burning stars, is a consequence of enormous sacrifice on a cosmic scale. Self-assertion does not have to be selfish. But in fallen humanity, it often is. Repulsion doesn't have to be something disgusting or vicious, but for the same reason, repulsion is often that. So in the transaction between subject and object, the subject, the self or the pseudo-self, has an interest in an object. The subject desires or wants that object for itself, one way or another. So something of the self is projected onto the object. We're speaking very psychologically here, as something that the self or pseudo-self lacks. What it lacks, it projects on the object, and it becomes the object of desire. Projection, with or without knowledge of the desire world or of astrology, is a very complicated subject, because what is projecting what and what is reality and what isn't is very difficult. I'm sure Lou has been in many of those conversations that you don't know who is who in terms of projection. For now, let's suffice it to say that in desire projection, there is a partial identification with the object, or else you couldn't desire it. I want that, or I need that. That's a partial identification. For example, if we want to see it, we can see it all around us. Just walk into someone's house or into their private room and look at the possessions. And those possessions are a projection of what that character is, because they desired those things to attract them to themselves because they felt a need for them. Since the knower or the desirer is either the self or the pseudo-self, the object of the self-identification is from an incomplete self or pseudo-self. Thus, in a very strange usage of the word, all objects are selfish when it comes to self-assertion. Not selfish in this is mine, but selfish in that the self sees itself or sees its want in the thing and feels it has to assert itself in order to interact with it. Therefore, the end of self-assertion is this selfish lack of things, which astrologically is ruled by Saturn. Now, there still is a subject-object relation in the higher Venusian part of the desire world, but the emphasis and the action are different. The more self-sacrificial one is, with pure selfless sacrifice, the more the emphasis is on giving rather than on the object. When you put an object in front of you, in terms of self-assertion, you're going to go for that object. But when you see the need of something outside of yourself and you sacrifice your own being for the sake of that outside, the giving and what you give and how you give becomes more important. When someone gives, they care about the small and the definite needs, but the love is much more expansive. As in the hackneyed cliche, it's the thought behind the gift. In this case, it's the desire behind the gift rather than the gift itself, because what you're giving is much more. You're giving from yourself, you're giving of yourself. So the intent and meaning is greater. And as a result of this, the act, the motive act of self-sacrificial giving is expansive. The object is expanded, and in a way the subject is expanded in the giving. Eventually, the giving becomes the all, even without a specific object. And we call that philanthropy. And philanthropy is ruled by Jupiter. So in a vague way, we have a description of the desire world. The whole desire world is ruled by the moon. The desire body is ruled by the moon. When the desire body motivation is self-assertion, when it is martial, it is self-assertion relative to an object. And that object is part of the missing self. And so it is selfish, and it is Saturnine. When the motive is self-sacrifice, and the person sacrifices their own personal being for the sake of someone or something outside, it is very expansive, and the expansion becomes the all. So what we have is a basic description of the desire world and the desire body. Higher ruled by Venus, lower ruled by Mars. The epitome of the lower desire world is Saturn. The epitome of the higher desire world is Jupiter. Now, let's go back and tie this together with our color sphere. just so we understand that the color sphere and astrology put together give a really good understanding of what takes place in the desire world and in our desire bodies, so that we can understand, we have at least the mechanics or the positioning of how things are. So we have a crystal clear neutral center, the region of feeling. But the feeling probably permeates throughout the color sphere, but it is pure feeling right in the center. It's crystalline. Projecting out from the center are radii. And the radii extend as far as the being is capable of extending them. The capacity for desire, or the capacity of intensity of desire. And around the equator of the color sphere is the color wheel. A color wheel made up of pure color, so that as you work out from the center, the intensity of desire is related to the saturation of the hue, so that the further out you get, the more color that there is and the more intense the color is. And then the hues are around the equator. If we divide this, for us we have to do it arbitrarily. If we divide the color wheel into 12 parts, like the 12 signs of the zodiac, and then take the lunes and take the divisions between the signs and run them up to the North Pole and down to the South Pole, we have we add the third dimension of color, which is brightness. So we have hue, saturation, and brightness. To the degree that the object becomes the desire or the motive force for self-assertion, to that degree, the more the Saturnian quality enters in. And the darker the colors become on the lunes that are the signs of the zodiac. So that when you get to the South Pole of the color sphere, it is onyx black. Saturn black. Saturn has always been called the dark one. So the lower hemisphere, where self-assertion takes place, results in the shades. The upper hemisphere, where self-sacrifice for the sake of the other, the more light enters in. Until at the North Pole, which is Jupiterian, everything is pure white light. And of all things, the Greek name for Jupiter was all bright. So we can see we got a really lovely, lovely picture. We can understand the workings of it by this metaphor. Now, a metaphor like this is helpful because it gives you coordinates for understanding what's going on, because most people couldn't handle a direct experience in the desire world because it's overwhelming and it's confusing. A metaphor like this is intellectually beautiful in that it dovetails together how things work, and we see the gods in the stars and how they work into the nature of desire and how character is unfolded in a way that is quite logical. However, it is only a metaphor. And we have to keep that in mind, because what often happens is we fall in love with metaphors and we let the metaphor become the reality. And when we do that, it is like any other symbol. The symbol stands between the viewer and the thing that is viewed. Now, we have a rough idea of the relationship of what happens when a stimulus or when a feeling becomes a desire. Let's look at some very simple, simplistic examples so we can see how it all works. In the visible world that we see around us every day, where our consciousness is focused, we are not the only beings that have desire bodies. Animals also have desire bodies, but there are differences. Their desire bodies are much simpler. They haven't developed a true individuality. They don't have a threefold spirit. They don't have a self. They don't have I am consciousness. Instead of this self, they have a group self, a group spirit that acts in what we would call instinct, but that's not the best use of the word instinct. So each species has its particular instinct. We see this around us every day. When I walk out the back door, the birds are all startled by my suddenly opening the back door. They're at the bird feeder, and they all are startled by me, and they all fly off. They're responding to the same stimulus together with each other, and they never run into each other. Never. They have a common spirit that, that they're all working together within that. They ride off, or they rise off, or fly off as one. Now, beside having instinctual responses, there are other differences between the desire bodies of animals and ours. Because the desire bodies of animals are younger in their development, they don't have the wide range of desires. The divine part isn't there yet. It's a substitute, a vicarious divine part, so they have a much lower, smaller range of desire. And those desires are what we call the behavior or the habits of each particular species. This is why the zodiac is called the circle of animals, because there's a great idea within it that works out through various different species, and each species has the mood of the group spirit that is behind it. This is why raccoons like to wash their food, for example. They're said to be ruled by Cancer because that's part of their attitude. Human beings, get too Cancerian in an insecure way, and they have to wash their hands every 15 minutes, whether they've done anything dirty or not. Being creatures and not creators, they have not yet developed much of the giving desires, the creative desires. Their desires are mostly about survival, such as seeking food, or seeking safety, or seeking reproduction. Now, in the nature of the animals is a reason why mystics prefer to be vegetarians. First and foremost is that animals feel pain where plants do not. Animals kill each other, certainly they do. But when they kill each other, there are lessons involved between predator and prey. And those lessons are important lessons. It's much different than an animal laying in a feedlot all of its life and not getting any experience at all when it's killed in it. You can't run away from the guy that's going to kill you because that option is not available. Also, when we look at nature, we see that it is highly efficient. Nature doesn't waste anything. In terms of eating animal food, we're doing something highly inefficient relative to the creative activity. An animal that can experience desire, an animal that can experience feeling, is much more valuable to the general waking consciousness of the whole than a plant is. And if we cut short the life of an animal, what we're doing is we're going against the purpose of the whole cosmos, which is to have experience. and we're cutting it short, we're taking away. And then beyond that, the animal food is filled with survival desires. And when you consume animal flesh, you're taking those desires into you, and some of them stick with you. In some cases, it's enough to tip the balance away from genteel behavior because there's a little prompting and urging there that isn't from ourselves. In any case, if we want good, clear-cut examples of the function of desire, we look in the animal kingdom, at least for repulsion and the lower desires. Take, for example, a lion. A lion is there, it's got a zebra carcass, and it's eating away. Now the lion has asserted itself to take the prey for its food. And that self-assertive assertion or action produced a repulsion. The zebra, no doubt, especially tried to run away. It didn't want to be eaten. From repulsion, it ran for its life. And that repulsive force continues through the whole act of killing the zebra and eating it. Because there are jackals and hyenas that come and they want free food. They don't want to chase down a zebra for themselves. So what does the lion do? He growls, and they keep their distance. That is the same repulsive force that is keeping them away as it was the repulsive force that kept the zebra running. If we want to look at the other direction, and we want to experience self-sacrifice and attraction, we have to look for high-minded humans. But even in not highly developed high-minded humans, there are people that you just want to be around because they're lovingly giving of themselves. This is why Venus and Jupiter put together are extremely popular people. Because they're giving, and because they're giving, people are just drawn to them without even knowing why. Better examples are found when a person is humanitarian in giving, like Mother Teresa. She gave, and she attracted many, many people who needed her with the greatest, most simple kinds of needs. And there was little possibility in the way she set things up for personal reward or popularity or anything like that. But you can see that to the degree that a person loves and affects that love, they attract people. Eventually she became famous, but that wasn't by her choice. All right, these are really simple examples. This is a really beautiful thing because you can state this spiritual truth about self-assertion and repulsion versus self-sacrifice and attraction. You can give it to the whole world and it can't be abused. Take, for example, somebody says to himself, well, if I give, I'll attract more people to me and I'll be able to sell more. But once you start thinking that way, you're asserting yourself and the selfishness enters in and you repulse the people. We've all seen those kinds of people that are to be jolly good people that are they're going to sell you, and they're selling you their personality. And this shows you cannot abuse this. The desire world is very moral. That it doesn't need any code. That the experience in itself is how we learn what is right or wrong. All right. This is a statement of the very rudimentary function of the desire body and the desire world. And now next time we'll finally work through the desire world as in a functional way. But next time will be 3 weeks from tonight because next week is Thanksgiving and we won't meet. and then the week following will be the astrology time. Have a great Thanksgiving without turkey. Yeah, thank you.
What do you call the ones who give yet?
What?
What do you call the ones who give big time?
Philanthropist.
Philanthropy.
Yeah.
Is there, I mean, a lot of times behind the idea of philanthropy, there is the idea of
Yeah.
more greed, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the foundations that fail. This is why Andrew Carnegie, who was a Sagittarius ruled by Jupiter, knew they stated, when you hear it on the radio, when he gives to National Public Radio, he says, the Carnegie Foundation to do real and permanent good. And there was not a selfish motivation there. In fact, he made almost $1 billion. He was about the first person to become a billionaire, and I think at least 3/4 of it he gave away. All right. Thank you very much.